Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here today with us at Competere Policies for Sustainable Development. My name is Stefano Sartorio, and I will guide you through this insightful event. China, after the 5-year plan, what dialogue with the dragon stems from the need to broaden the discussion on Chinese development and projections in a multifaceted world made of countries. With us today, and I really thank them all for being here. We have a panel composed of young scholars and researchers. Francesca Ghiretti, Research Fellow Asia at Istituto Affari Internazionali, Elodie Cardonnet, Research Fellow at Competere, Master in China Studies, International Relations and Sustainable Development. Then we have Domenico Repaci, Member of the Editorial Board, Management, Finance and Ethics at Pontificia Università della Santa Croce in Rome. Then we have Sehoyun Han, Master in China Studies at Renmin University of China. And then we have Shalva Chikhladze, Sinologist and Visiting Lecturer of Tbilisi State University, Department of International Relations. So, China is undoubtedly occupying the headlines of almost all the newspapers around the world, together with the United States. During March, a Chinese Communist Party released the 5-year plan that we commented in our latest report, the 14th 5-year plan towards 2025 and beyond. Through this event, we will analyze briefly every point of it, thanks to our researchers. The plan also helps us in clarifying to ourselves maybe what might be the areas of cooperation with China and which are not so. In general, the question that everyone is asking is, can we still hope to have a dialogue with China? The reason for this question resides in the recent more assertive nature among China-EU-US relations. Since the signing of the Comprehensive Agreement on Investments, the heat between the three theaters increased at a fast pace. The diplomatic visit of the US delegation guided by Blinken to Asia and then to EU, the Alaska meeting and the intention to strive for a managed competition, the Atlantic Council blueprint on China, which delivers a more conservative view and approach about how the country should behave in order to contain China's rise. And then we have all all 27 new countries agreed to launch a brand new strategy on the Indo-Pacific, a geopolitical concept that Beijing sees as a smokescreen for anti-China schemes. These connected to a stronger relations building into the Quad dialogue and possible new meeting between EU and India in order to evaluate a potential infrastructure project together. At the Boao Forum of last week, Xi Jinping also stated again that Chinese internal affairs are not of competence of other countries, growing further political barriers for future collaborations on red line issues. But then we had the chance to appreciate a change in Chinese vaccine diplomacy, given the latest news on the countries willing to accept other European vaccines. And this news comes from yesterday. The US had relaxed restrictions on Chinese students, and students, of course, from other countries, to have their classes in presence. From a privileged observation point, as observers and analysts, we tend to see various openings and subsequent closures. Turning now to Francesca Ghiretti, given these circumstances and the tumultuous times we are experiencing regarding the relation with China, is the space for dialogue shrinking or widening in your opinion? And which are the main frictional points to environmental, military, technology, and economics you see as the most blatant and that China shares with the world at large?
Great. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me here. It's a great pleasure. I think I'm not saying anything new when I say that, of course, the space for conversation with China is shrinking. We hoped it would widen thanks to the Biden administration, but what we've noticed is that that is not the case. The Biden administration has remained quite assertive, and because it has a much more open and a much more shared effort with the European Union to bring back the transatlantic alliance, what we're seeing is a shift in that direction within the European Union as well. Of course, this latter actor still prefers engagement over containment, which we know is a particularly loaded word because it was used during the Cold War towards the Soviet Union. But again, what we've seen in the past few weeks and months is a shrinking of space for dialogue. Now, there are several areas of friction, and of course, you mentioned a few sectors which are absolutely relevant, but at the end of the day, they kind of contaminate with one another. So environmentally, I think that usually environment is the space where people think, well, we need to collaborate. So that is also the area where least contention is and where collaboration is most possible. But the reality of things is that, yes, what we've seen last week is that in words, collaboration is indeed possible. And because it's such a massive issue, countries and actors tend to highlight collaboration. But we also know that both China and the US want to lead this process. We're not quite sure whether they'll be able to lead it together. They definitely have different means and different objectives in terms of internal objectives. And we also saw that when the European Union tried to ask to China to do a little bit more, China responded quite defensively. So we need to see, for example, how the carbon border in the European Union will go. We need to see specific issues. I don't know whether I'm right or wrong, but I'm definitely not as positive as most are in terms of the possibility of collaboration in the area of environment. Militarily, of course, that's probably one. I wouldn't say the most contentious area. Human rights is definitely that one, but the South China Sea and now the exercises in Taiwan, the US commitment to protect Taiwan, also because of the presence of the SMC, the chip maker, makes the military area particularly hot, and this is connected to technology. The technological race, the technological revolution, primacy in the technological revolution and in the technological race is a particularly hot area of contention between the two actors. The European Union here lags a little bit behind. Is committed, but of course is not at the same level. Is struggling both in terms of software and in terms of hardware. Now is trying to catch up, but it might be a little bit too late. And that is also why in that area, as well in that of military intervention, it needs to stay within the American umbrella. Although it advocates for strategic autonomy is a particularly difficult concept to realize in the short term. And then if we look at economy, economy is perhaps the area where, if one has some precise goals in mind, it's easier to have a conversation. We saw how the comprehensive agreement on investment was concluded formally. Of course, now we don't know whether it will actually be concluded, but it was formally concluded at the end of 2020. And we know that despite the fact that in the European Union now everybody is saying, well, it will never happen because of what happened in the past few weeks in terms of sanctions, the truth is that China is already making some steps to show that it is implementing what it was expected within the comprehensive agreement on investments. And these are good signals and are signals that should be received as such. But again, we have issues. We have an internal protected market within China. We have a wide use of state-owned enterprises, which of course is creating a distortion within the competition market globally. And then you have this unleveled playing field, which is particularly complicated for an economic reality, mostly such as the European Union, but also as the United States. Again, however, I do think that this is the area where conversation is most likely, not just because we are a connected economy, a global connected economy, and we need each other, but also because if actors are able to set precise targets and negotiate those targets with China, the past years have shown that you do have results. At the same time, we're also seeing a trend towards a little bit of protectionism. You do have a lot of protectionist policies being adopted everywhere. So we need to balance these two. Of course, that could be a leverage for negotiation. I'm not saying that it's entirely negative, but this is basically how the situation is. They said, because of everything that I've just mentioned quite quickly, I'm still quite convinced that the space for conversation is shrinking. And if we wanted to remain open, we need to stop politicizing every single issue. And we need to start have a conversation on the basis of what we want and how we want to get there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francesca. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think the key word here is balance, of course. And as you said, the space for conversation is shrinking. We also heard about this during the WOW Forum. One CEO of a famous logistic platform said that that is also the vice president of the EU Chamber of Commerce in China. Said that the increasing politicization among the business issues is becoming a real problem. So I also think that the pandemic brought this situation at a new level, since we have difficult also in meeting with Chinese counterparts somehow, and also the reciprocal population, European, Chinese population, are facing difficulties in these regards. So I think that for the next year, so last part of 2021 and first part of 2022, we'll reserve some surprises on this. So thank you so much again. Now Thank you. Now I'm referring to Shalva Chikhladze. Thank you for being here from Georgia.
Hello, Stefano. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. So going deeper after Francesca introduction, going deeper on the mentioned issues, with you, I wish to discuss about the economy, the economic side of the 5-year plan. In your opinion, which are China's economic projects in the third decades of the 21st century, also the most notable?
Okay, thank you, Stefano, again, and thanks also for the interesting question. I think the economic part, when we are talking in general about China, the economy is one of the most interesting and significant aspect of talking about China, because China is the biggest developing country and China is the second economy in the world. Before started the analyzing the 5-year plan from economic point of view, I want to highlight several economic data what we just saw several weeks ago. Firstly, I think no one could expect it that according to the first quarter of this year, China's economic growth would be 18%, 80.3%. I think it's quite amazing number. And also compared to other major economies, China was the only country in the world which has small but still positive economic growth during the global pandemic, and it was 2.3%. I think that even though that sometimes we think that those numbers could be manipulated, as it sometimes happen in regard with China, but we see that in general where many countries like in European Union or other part of the world face to serious lockdowns, China's economy are almost open. They still have the strict restriction on traveling policies, but still domestically they are open. I think there are several important aspects from economic point of view what we have to know about from Chinese 5-year plan. First is that when we started analysis this document, I had an impression that China tried to be more focused on domestically than internationally. I think that's come from this global pandemic that China saw its own strengths amid global pandemic, and it saw, of course, it was challenging China time for them, but Chinese decision makers saw how China's huge population and rapidly increasing middle class could become the main locomotive of Chinese economy. And yes, we could say that maybe in following years China should try to be more focused on domestically than internationally. But of course, it does not mean that China is going to be isolated from the point of view. There is two key aspects, as Francesca recently mentioned. This is implementation, economic free trade economic agreement with European Union, and also implementation, almost same kind of agreement with Eastern Asian state. I think China tries to take a deep breath from trade war, because the previous year was kind of challenging for it because of this tariff barrier and Donald Trump's policy towards it. Going to deepen, I think there is several important aspects that need to be taken into consideration. Firstly, is that China's government try to digitalize their own economy and use artificial intelligence in it, because I think all of us, it does not matter where we are in, like Eastern, Western Europe, or Asia, or in Africa, but we see that during the lockdowns, digitalization of economy become quite crucial for sustainable development. So I think China also saw this opportunity, and CCP is going to pay more attention on this area. There is another issues, for example, to support the local governments from central government, and central government is going to pay around 3 trillion yuan and continue constructing high-speed railway project and other infrastructure project to keep China like going ahead, because even though that China had like positive economic growth, they also face serious turbulences, especially small and medium-sized entrepreneurs. And from this document, we could see that central government is going to encourage small and medium-sized entrepreneurs and improve middle class society, because they just saw as a opportunity amid global pandemic. And in numbers, for example, according to this plan, they are going to increase the loans from small and medium-sized entrepreneurs, and I think this is really interesting aspect of it. And another fact is to um, uh, encourage cross-border electronic commercial centers, and China established and launched all more than 40 electronic commerce center inside and outside the country. So this will be maybe main project in the following years. And this is also worth to mention that unlike the other 5-year plans, Chinese policymakers become cautious. And they did not put the concrete numbers of economic growth for this year, and they only highlighted around 6% of economic growth. But if we take into consideration the data from the first quarter, it was 18.3%. I think China's economic growth might be much more larger than they expected and than International Monetary Fund expected, for example. And to sum up the war, what would become the main economic project in following years? I don't think that China is going to be isolated, as I mentioned before, but I just saw that Chinese government try to improve the quality of their economy, and also uh, to improve the numbers and also quality the middle class society. It, of course, it does not mean that China will stop the Belt and Road Initiative and the implementation of other kind of project, but I think we have to pay attention these agendas, because I just think that sometimes maybe some European countries have much more expectation, for example, like FTA from China, or some other areas. So I think, of course, there is a space for dialogue for China, but it was to mention that we no need to have a much more expectation in following years, because as we see from this document, they are going to be more focused on the domestic development, rather be focused on international level. But we, of course, could see some changes. It's always happened, and that's what we need to follow the trends and agendas what are implemented by CCP in China. That's shortly, Stefano, what I wanted to say. What will be the main focus of China in the following years?
Thank you so much, Shako, for your contribution. I see that issues are really also on the economic side are really complicated, but that's, of course, is when you have to deal with China. You also mentioned an important part of Chinese economic development, which is the digitalization of the economy. We are also looking at this through like digitalization of the currency, for example, which might be in turn a useful way to internationalize more the renminbi, and then, of course, to foster electronic commerce on a transboundary, maybe an international scale. So this, I think, is one of the most interesting things we are going to see in the next months and in the next years. Thank you so much, Shako, again. And now from economy, I turn to technology. And now I'm referring to Sehoyun, who is calling us from China. Hope you can hear us well. So can you hear us, Anne?
Yeah, I can hear you right now.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. So I'm going with a question for you. During your studies and research, you often spoke about Chinese technological ambitions. What is your opinion behind China's aim towards self-sufficiency in technology, and how will the semiconductor supercycle affect China's plans to achieve self-sufficiency?
Thank you for the two questions. I will try to answer that in my presentation about my observations that I will talk about right now. First of all, it is a great honor to be able to present my observations to the dear audience of Competere. But before I talk about the two sessions and the 14th five-year plan, I want you all to know that there have been significant updates to the Theater of International Relations to begin with. In contrary to how the world expected Joe Biden to restore the liberal order by enhancing the global value chain, he is also leaning towards self-sufficiency, especially in semiconductors. He has already shown his support for Intel IDM 2.0, which has far-reaching implications to the current value chain. IDM 2.0, by the way, stands for Integrated Device Manufacturer, which is a term used to describe a semiconductor company that has complete supply chain of fabrication design and foundry. So American memory semiconductor companies such as Western Digital and Micron is also engaging in merger with Japan's Kioxia. At the same time, these projects are supported with heavy influx of cash towards the tech industries in forms of stock purchases by the Federal Reserve. The current M1 money supply of the US is over $18.4 trillion. And this is a 450% increase in comparison to the M1 before the coronavirus pandemic. This also has a deadly impact to China's self-sufficiency plans, but I'll get to that in a minute. To start with, China's main focus on 2 sessions was to propose the 14 five-year plan that shifts its course of development from quantitative growth to qualitative. The end goal that they propose is dual circulation strategy. So this is a combination of the Great International Circulation, which stands for global value chain, and the internal circulation that only cycles within the Chinese borders. The key word is self-sufficiency, and it aims to become self-sufficient in 8 industries and 7 technologies. The 8 industries are the following: material science, manufacturing robotics, aircraft engines, electric vehicles, medical equipment, agricultural machinery, ship and rail building, and last but not least, satellite application system. The 7 source technologies are artificial intelligence, quantum information, brain science, biotechnology, pharmaceutical technique, aerospace and base-cap manufacturing, and most important topic of today's discussion, which is semiconductors. Semiconductors are extremely important in today's world due to its productivity and versatility. If I'd have to pick one of the single most important resources of today's world, it would certainly be semiconductors. The reason why we can meet and have a discussion right now is all because of semiconductors that are working in our laptops, computers, smartphones, and even in our Bluetooth headset if you're using them like me right now. As you all would know, the reason why China wants to become self-sufficient is simply because it wants to become powerful. But just saying that they want to become powerful might be superficial. To be more accurate, the discourse should be focused on geopolitical implications. For example, the key to understanding China's motives is platform. I'm not sure how many of the audience is aware of the word metaverse. The term is used to describe a form of virtual world that is collectively shared by the users, the people, like you and me. In a way, this very digital conference room right now is the metaverse. The metaverse market is aimed to surpass $1.5 trillion by year 2030. And if we do a conservative measure by reducing that current growth rate from 40% down to 20%, it will still be a market that has a value of $40 to $50 trillion of today's worth by year 2050. As extended reality develops by the advancements of technologies, our lives will also advance from physical to virtual. This rather untraditional form of element clearly contrasts from traditional elements of geopolitics, such as air, land, and sea. And it definitely tempts the hearts of all decision makers around the world. China aims to become self-sufficient on aerospace and base-cap technologies are also within the same context. Like how the metaverse with new resources is a subject of national interest, space and deep sea with new resources are also subject of national interest. Becoming self-sufficient in semiconductor technologies is relevant to how they want to protect their share of the national interest defined by power. Like how John Mearsheimer says, states care about relative wealth because economic might is the foundation of military might. However, what China might not realize is that there are many challenges ahead to becoming self-sufficient. It took nearly 30 years for the world to figure out the perfect combination of value chain to deliver the best products at the cheapest price. And breaking away from that current order of supply chain has deadly impacts to the industries. While China is certainly likely to become self-sufficient in technologies such as batteries, but semiconductors it's a whole new story. In a total of 8 sections of fabrication process that requires at least 300 materials to nearly 1,000, no one material or precision engineering technique is achievable within a decade. As future devices start requiring more processing power, namely quantum computing, the level of precision needed to achieve the best performance at the most affordable price it's beyond the realm of nanometers. Fixating the goal on self-sufficiency is a terrible mistake in terms of global competition. Yield rates are also a serious concern for the Chinese industry that needs mass quantities of chips to successfully play their role as the gears of the world factory. While China has made significant achievements in semiconductor design, fabrication has at best around 14 nanometers. In the era where tech industries are striving to bring the next generation of economic platform, becoming self-sufficient is not only economically unrealistic, but it is technologically impossible as well. The first generation of telecommunications brought voice exchange as one of the major methods of interaction. The era of 2G was the era of text messaging. The era of 3G was the era of social network services that exchange pictures like Facebook. The era of 4G that we live in right now is the age where we stream videos to interact with each other, like how we are interacting right now. So the era of 5G that will come in the near future will combine all these elements of interaction into the realm of virtual reality. And in the era of 6G is the true endgame where we access a terabyte speeds of internet all across the globe, through signal transmissions from satellites. So becoming self-sufficient does not only mean that China becomes potentially incompetent, but it also means that it will miss all the opportunities that these telecommunication platforms will offer. This does not only apply to China, but it also applies to the United States. But this is a story for another day. What is really important is that Biden administration's securitization of the chip industry resulted two most fatal blows to China's dual circulation design. Unlike how Trump administration was at least negotiable in terms of value chain, Biden administration truly aims to engage in the Great Divide. This split in supply chain will certainly halt many of China's semiconductor material and parts industries. On top of that, the mass influx of cash by the Federal Reserve will significantly weaken China's foreign currency reserve that is supposed to function as a magnet that pulls foreign resources and talents. What is worse is that in relation to the supercycle, the uncertainties created by the Sino-American hegemonic competition is creating massive bubble in the semiconductor demand while it weakens the supply. China's aims are truly admirable, but what one wants and what one could get is vastly different. The true innovation begins from giving recognition to these realities, but as of now, that's not something that I see in China's 14th five-year plan. What I do wish is that China would compromise into an Afro-Eurasian supply chain. In other words, the Belt and Road Initiative. To truly bring the world that shares a common destiny, like how President Xi emphasized when he gave his visions about the One Belt, One Road in Kazakhstan 8 years ago. So that's all I have for today, and I'll pass the mic to the next speaker.
Thank you so much, Han. Indeed, really interesting. We are going to see a new kind of world made of virtual reality. That's the question. I think that you also answered really well to what might be the future, the possible future outcomes of this U.S., China, and of course the world competition on semiconductors. So thank you so much. And then considering technology, of course, we are all well aware of the complexities and changes that international panorama is experimenting since the last decades. We understand that sustainability is, as well as technology, a great asset in China's strategy, both for its international and domestic arenas. With this, I am turning to Elodie, and starting from what you observe in the five-year plan, what are the major guidelines on environment and sustainability, and how do you interpret the last summit on climate with the US?
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here today. To answer your question, first of all, let me start by saying that prejudice and misconception are common when it comes to the topic of environmental protection in China and to the topic of international dialogue on the matter with China. There are four main undeniable reasons behind blame from the international community. So first, the historical background. Nature protection concerns were virtually absent in China until 1972 and started to emerge as a priority only in the early 2000s, namely in 2006 through the 11th five-year plan, the first to introduce major binding pollutant control indicators. Secondly, high pollution levels in many areas and sectors. Thirdly, still inadequate legal standards. In fact, the People's Republic of China's constitution mentions the environment only since 1978. Environmental courts have been established since 1989. And 5-year plans include ecology and environment targets and indicators since 1976. However, decentralization in China is often linked to lack of resources, mismanagement, corruption, lack of transparency and reliable data, leading to ineffective implementation of national environmental policies. Lastly, political priorities. As in other countries, environmental protection needs to be balanced with other strategic goals related to society, economics, and security. So is dialogue with China on the matter possible? There are arguments against the predominant negative conception I just highlighted. So first, social awareness is rising, partly due to communication strategies. In fact, China started turning nature into a marketing tool long before most Western countries, with a positive impact on social values and consideration for environment. Secondly, the national legal environment is evolving. More and more steps are taken in the legal system for environment protection. Thirdly, political engagement. Environmental issues are no longer denied or ignored by politicians in China. Instead, they start to be faced both by words and concrete actions at the national and international levels. Lastly, China is the first global investor in research and development. A total amount of $280 billion was spent in 2018, and much of these investments goes to projects related to environment. China is investing in green technologies, for instance. The PRC is the first clean technology investor and producer in the world since 2012. In reforestation projects, forest land cover increased by 5% in the last 30 years. In the energy field, I can mention, for instance, solar panels and offshore wind production. So, notwithstanding difficulties, Chinese government is conscious that environment protection is indeed a priority, as it is evident from the binding environmental indicators presented in the last 14 5-year plan. So there are 5 main indicators. The first is a decrease of energy consumption per unit of gross domestic product, that is energy intensity, by 13.5%. Secondly, a decrease in carbon dioxide emissions per unit of GDP by 18%, that is carbon intensity. An increase in percentage of days with good air quality in cities at prefecture level by 0.5%. An increase in the percentage of surface water reaching grade 3 or above, that is an increased quality of surface water by 1.6%. And lastly, an increase in forest coverage by 1%. These targets I just mentioned consider 2020 as the baseline here and 2025 as the target here. As a matter of fact, the approval of the 14 5-year plan has been followed by intense national and international activities to comply with the environmental indicators set. At the national level, Chinese institutions officially showed support for investments in clean energy development, as it is evident from a document jointly issued on March 12 by the National Development and Reform Commission, the People's Bank of China, the China Banking Regulatory Commission, and the National Energy Administration, namely the notice on guiding to increase financial support to promote the healthy and orderly development of wind power and photovoltaic power generation industries. Chinese officials also show their support for green finance, as it is evident from trial green zones experiments that are ongoing since 2017 in 6 provinces, and that are likely to be extended to more areas, as they are proving successful in combining economic development and environment protection. Thus, they could be used as a model in other parts of the country to help meet 2060 carbon targets. Moreover, Chinese officials announced that the nuclear power industry in China has entered a high-quality development phase. As of April 2021, so this month, China has 66 operative nuclear units, and more are under construction, including a smart energy nuclear power plant whose plan combines photovoltaic energy, offshore wind power, hydrogen power, and nuclear energy. As international observers highlight, China has taken the global lead in nuclear energy construction capacity, bringing the country closer and closer to the net zero carbon dioxide emissions target. The targets set in the 14th five-year plan are also in line with the last declarations in international meetings, as you said. So for instance, by President Xi Jinping, notably on two occasions. In 2020, at the general debate of the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly, he drew attention to Chinese efforts to implement vigorous policies and measures in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions under the United Nations Framework Convention of Climate Change, to reach the peak of carbon emission by 2030, and to achieve carbon neutrality before 2060. He also emphasized Chinese involvement in international cooperation systems related to environment protection, in particular the Paris Agreement. And President Xi Jinping took the opportunity to reaffirm Chinese environmental climate targets, lastly during the Leaders' Summit on Climate on Earth Day on April 22 this year. In his speech for Man and Nature, Building a Community of Life Together, President Xi mentioned China's commitment to harmony between human and nature, to green development. He said, and I quote, "To protect the environment is to protect productivity, and to improve the environment is to boost productivity, to systemic governance, rather than a simplistic palliative approach, to a people-centered approach, to multilateralism," and this is very important, "and to the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities." It is also important to notice that bilateral talks with other relevant actors are ongoing. In this sense, the recent official visit of the United States Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, John Kerry, to China is an important sign that the two largest carbon dioxide emitters and the two largest world economies may be increasingly willing to cooperate on environmental issues in the near future, as they declared in the joint statement addressing the climate crisis that was released on April 17 this year. In conclusion, we need to wait to see whether such statements will be translated into action, as Francesca said. However, what is certain and positive is that, in my opinion, is that dialogue is open. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elodie. Yes, it will be interesting to see if those statements will be translated into action indeed, and also we might need to look at how China addresses environmental issues internally and how it addresses externally, since we have also having the chance to see and to study how China sometimes is dealing with environmental issues in other countries, for example. But thank you so much for your inputs that allow us to look more in depth to another really important topic for the future of the power relations among the international actors in the near future. Last but not the least, the recent events in the South China Sea have sparked even increased attention to China's military buildup and development. This, in turn, is a very important topic in order to understand the real capabilities and independence of China when dealing with its projections around the world. Speaking with Domenico. Hi, Domenico. Thanks for being here. I ask you one question. What are your feelings regarding this issue from your observations starting from the 5-year plan and the latest events? Are there, in your opinion, any notable changes and reorientations in this regard?
So thank you for your question. Thank you, everybody, for your very impressive insights and contributions. I really think I learned a lot today. So thank you again. So to give a short answer to your question, I would say that actually there is no major news about the military in the 5-year plan. I will synthesize what regards the military in the plan with 2 key concepts. And after all, if there will be some remaining time, I will also try to give some impression about the status questionis of the army and the regional scenario. So those areas of much relevance in the plan about the military, in my opinion, are the question for modernization and the allusions to the military-civil fusion concept. So why I say there is no great news? If you look at the strategic frameworks, they're always the same. If we look at the vocabulary and the wording of the 5-year plan, and therefore the supremacy of the party, of the role of the party, of the military, we see that is all in line with official sources such as the 2019's white paper, the China national defense in the new era, or the national defense law and the amendments which have been done last December. So the core question is always there, and it is the question which is related to the military discourse at large in China, and which is the modernization of the army. So the ultimate object is to advance towards the known milestones of 2035 and 2049. And we know, of course, that military modernization, as anything that has to do with military policies or military strategies, go always beyond the time frame of a plan which is set up for 5 years. And we know, of course, that the modernization process started in the 80s, actually, like in the last years of the 70s, and it was accelerated in the 90s, especially after the Gulf War, which was actually a real trauma for the Chinese political elite. And step by step to the great reform of the People's Liberation Army in 2015. So on modernization, the plan doesn't really add anything new. I would say that actually there is a strong emphasis on the acceleration of the established policies. And so actually there is, as said by everybody during their contributions, there is this strong relevance on the development of internal technological capabilities, and, for example, reducing the dependency from military imports from external partners. And this has been traditionally the role of Russia in providing military technology and military equipment. If I'm not mistaken, I don't want to give a wrong data, but I think that around 70 or 80% of military technology, especially in the areas of missile capabilities and aircraft engine, it has been provided by Russia in the time frame between 2007 and 2017. So actually, I think that modernization is important, is mainly the most important aspect related to the military in the plan, but there is actually nothing really new. The other point, which I think is worthy of mentioning, it is the allusions to the military-civil fusion concept. So I think that sometimes this idea, it is wrongly perceived, this idea of intersection of the military, the civil society and the military, it is wrongly perceived as something that has been elaborated in the last decade. I think that this intersection of civil society and military we may find it back in the days of Mao already. Of course, at that time was for different purposes. So, so today, in our days, this concept has been structured as the intersection of the civil and military technological environments in order to advance technological innovation, and especially in the area of military technology. So this concept has been highly mentioned during the unfolding of China 2025. But this concept of military-civil fusion has been quite controversial in the last years. And we all know the accusations and allegations against some Chinese companies of being infiltrated by the military. And we know the stories of Huawei and so on and so forth. Today in the plan, we can see a reference about the necessity to integrate the technological and scientific advancement between the military and the non-military industries, but there is no direct mentioning to the military-civil fusion. Again, I think that the most important aspect over here, it is again going beyond the plan. What do I mean by that? I think that the most important thing related to the military-civil fusion is the amendments to the National Defense Law, which have been done last December. And precisely, if we have a look at Article 38 and the reform included into this article, we can see that actually, for the first time, it has been introduced like the role of market forces in driving the production and research within the military. So this is important, in my opinion, because it advanced at least in theory, the idea of the military-civil fusion, and it also adds some complexity to the identification of civil and military links, and especially when we look at the potential action of action performed by subcontracting actors. So that's quite important, and it will add some important material to be looked at and researched in the next years. So mainly, I think that within the plan, this is maybe the most important material we can draw. Of course, there's something else that can be said. You mentioned the South China Sea. Not just you, but other people too. For example, Francesca at the beginning. We can, find other aspects related to the military, not really direct or explicit, but we can draw some conclusion by reading them. For example, we can mention the proposition for a new Chinese maritime law. Right now, I do not remember the exact article, but it is included in the plan. And of course, this is absolutely related to Beijing's concern about the warring situation in the area and in the South China Sea, of course. But overall, I think that the points on modernization, technological capabilities, as it has been very thoroughly mentioned by Eric, and so the internal development of new disruptive technologies such as artificial intelligence, quantum physics, and so on. That is the most important things that we can draw from the plan. Now, if I have a couple of minutes more, I would also mention something about the military spending and the regional scenario, which is important in my opinion. And for example, all the things that we have been talking and all the military spending and the military build-up and reaching the technological frontier, all of this requires, of course, money. And the official data that we have for this year include this figure of 6.8% increasing of the in military spending over the previous year. And but actually, this is quite controversial too. According to most analysts, official Chinese data on military spending are not accurate, since they do not include all the amount of money given to some branches of the army or paramilitary forces, such as the People's Armed Police or the newly militarized Coast Guard or all the money given to the research and development efforts and so on. But this is important also on the repercussions on the regional scenario. So the military spending of China, it is paired by the military spending increasing in the whole Asia Pacific scenario. We can actually claim right now that there is something very much similar to an arms race in the Asia Pacific. This is important because it is going to affect the whole regional strategic scenario. If we look, for example, and I think I will conclude here for now, the regional strategic situation and the challenges for China. We know that China in Eastern Asia is looking for regional strategic supremacy. They have been developing already some disruptive technologies, such as hypersonic weapons. We know the latest missile capabilities and the F-17 in this area, and also all the ballistic capabilities to counter the presence of the United States fleet in the area. So the biggest part, the biggest focus of the Chinese military is in the regional scenario, and they are actually trying to increase their build-up in the Navy, in the People's Liberation Army, Navy, Air Force, and missile capabilities, and in order to be able to secure the whole area within the first and second inland chains. But then if we look outside of the area, so if we look at China's military projection in the world, this is actually still at the early stage. China's action, China's military engagement outside of the Eastern Asian scenario, and therefore South China Sea and the whole area north and south of Taiwan, which is actually splitting the maritime strategic areas focus of China into a northern and southern sectors. The capabilities of China are still quite limited, probably neglectable. On the contrary, in the international area outside of the inner region of Eastern Asia, we can actually see an important role of the Chinese military in acting under multilateral organizations. For example, China is the first country by number of soldiers in peacekeeping operations by the United Nations. This is something that goes in line with the quest for building some soft power capabilities, especially in Africa, and also in line with the future projection of the military in those areas, especially along the Belt and Road Initiative countries and geographic areas, in order, as much as the Chinese trade will grow in all of those areas, the interest of China will be more relevant, and therefore the military must be able to cope with those necessities. But this is something that actually, even the attempt to build a blue water navy capabilities, it is still far from what we can acknowledge right now. So this is something that probably in the long term will be relevant, but I think that for the next decades, so the short and mid-term, China's focus on the military will be there along their borders, along their maritime challenges in Eastern Asia, and possibly in the South Asian quadrant too. We should not also forget what is going on with India. So I think that generally speaking, this is the whole picture. And of course, there is also the question of Taiwan mentioned by Francesca. that is related, of course, to the quest of technological supremacy. But that is something more specific. So I think I will stop here for now, and then if there's anything more. Thank you.
Thank you, really, thank you so much, Domenico, for your hints. I think you, at the end, you highlighted a really important thing, that is, as much as Chinese trade will grow, also will grow the interest for China to project its military power outside its, let's say, near zone. It's really also interesting to note that this is a true fact that follows Chinese history from the founding of the Communist Party, as we can see that the previous military strategy was based on self-defense in the mainland, and then after Chinese economy expansion, it then went to the nearest seas, and which I think one of the main points of expansions would be the base in Djibouti, for example, one of the main highlights in Chinese military strategy. And then also I agree with you when you say that Chinese Chinese presence outside its borders, outside its nearest areas, because in order to protect their interests, there would be, of course, the necessity to protect trade routes. And this, of course, falls behind the presence of the military presence, which now is, of course, indeed, of the United States. So thank you so much. I think we perfectly respected the 60 minutes we had. For now, I don't see any questions, so I might close the meeting right now, the webinar right now. I would like really to thank all the present members of our wonderful panel for having been with us today. Also, Francesca is sending you her greetings, because he had to go for another meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very interesting day, and congratulations to everybody for this.
Thank you all for all the interesting insights.